So there I was, sitting on my basement floor with a faux leather case on my lap and a John Cougar Mellencamp CD in the other hand, and I was conflicted. I just couldn't do it. Oh, hey guys, if you're meeting for the first time, my name is Bryan Zevotek and I help professionals maximize their life, loves, and their legacy. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about how stuff gets in the way of us maximizing our life. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like, man, I really just wish I could simplify my life, even if it was just a little bit. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you guys some practical tips on what you can do to experience more joy, more peace, and more purpose in your life right now. But first I need to back up a little bit and give you the skinny on this story. So the town that I live in, it does these throwaway days or town cleanup days every year. And so we're kind of gearing up for this day to happen. And we're looking around the house for things that we can get rid of. And I stumbled across the faux leather case under an end table in the basement. And I sat down on the floor and I just started going through them. I mean, 50, 60 CDs of music that I'd had from a long time ago. I was really shocked at how hard it was for me to sort them into the keep and throw away pile. And it was sort of like in my mind, I'm like, no, I can't throw away these CDs. They were stored in something I didn't know I had in a place I couldn't find and contain music I don't even listen to anymore. Oh, the loss, Of course, it wasn't that dramatic, but really, that's what was going on inside of me, and I just was struggling to get rid of things that, frankly, I had kind of forgotten about. They really weren't of use to me anymore, but when it came to that point, I was struggling. The struggle was real, and I think if you've ever gone through that, you may have tried to get rid of something and noticed that there was an attachment there that maybe was a little bit stronger than you anticipated. So maybe you had this experience before, going through like magazines or books or old t-shirts or whatever it is. I think we can all kind of relate to this pack rat syndrome. So when I started losing my hair in my late 20s, I made a decision pretty much right then that I wasn't going to try to do the comb over or to get, move in the direction of toupees or wigs or whatever. I was basically just gonna suck it up, buttercup, buzz my head, grab the razor, whatever it would be, and just move on. And I kind of had this thought that, man, why couldn't I have been that unemotional and carefree about the other items in my life that I couldn't control, right? So it was pretty obvious to me that I couldn't control whether I lost my hair or not, and I wasn't gonna go through trying to cover it up or supplement, because that just doesn't ever look right or the way you think it's going to. So in that moment, I realized that's the key. It's emotional. I wasn't motivated enough to get rid of the CDs because I still had some type of emotional connection to those things. And it took me a minute to think about why. And that was really the question that I needed to be asking, is why was there an emotional connection to these items that were just sort of cluttering up the house that didn't need to be there? And I think what it was is I had idealized the time or romanticized the time when they were valuable to me. My early 20s, and I'm in college maybe, or moving into a job, and it was just a different time. The music was different, my life was different. And it took me a minute of realizing I wouldn't for 1 second trade everything that I have and experience and love and enjoy now to go back there. And when my emotions could connect now with the phase of life that I'm in and realize this is way more valuable than then, it was easier to just disengage and get rid of them. And then I moved on to my t-shirts, and I stumbled across some t-shirts, and I was kind of on a roll. So it was easy for me to realize, look, I'm just going to take the ones that I really want to keep that serve a purpose, whether it's work or workout or whatever it is, and throw them in a pile, and the rest of them, you're gone. And so I just kept going from one thing to another. And at the end of it, it wasn't this emotional tug that I felt like I couldn't let go. It was more this idea of like, wow, this feels good. When I look in my closet, I could see that I was regaining space. And not only that, but there was a lightening effect that I was starting to feel. Now you might think I'm being a little bit dramatic and exaggerating, but the fact of the matter is when you look in there and I realize, hey, I don't have that much stuff to manage anymore, it was a little bit easier. You see, I realized there was a payoff, and there's always a payoff when you go through this. And that payoff is when you declutter things, you feel lighter, it's easier, things are simplified, less complicated, and it doesn't just apply to things. But I had this thought, what if it's not just the physical stuff? what if your loved ones or those people you work with, the people that really matter to you, actually experienced a lighter version of you because you were going through that process on a regular basis? And not just with physical stuff, with things like expectations, failures, fears, things that you've held on to for far too long. They are decluttering your emotional and psychological headspace, and they actually are spilling over onto your relationships, your job, your purpose. See, I make this promise that the goal of everything that I do is to make you have a greater impact in your life, your love, and your legacy. Well, if you are emotionally and mentally, psychologically cluttered up, anxious, stressful, fearful, holding on to somebody else's expectations for your life, you probably are going to let those things spill over into other areas. And so if you're stressed out at work, if you're stressed out in your relationships, is it possible that your life is getting cluttered, your mind is getting cluttered, your emotions are cluttered up with things that really don't need to be there anymore? They don't serve the purpose of making you a better version of yourself, making you a better person, pushing you towards that which you want your life to count for. And if that's the case, then maybe it's time you had some cleanup days. Okay, so as promised, here are my 3 practical steps that you can go through right now to start having a little bit more joy, a little more peace, and maybe a little more purpose in your life. And I'm going to start with an easy one. Target something just to practice that you have around the house that you think might be easy to go through, whether it's old magazines, whether it's your t-shirts, whether it's pictures on your phone, and sort through those things and just declutter that right away. And here's what you're going to do. Think about what they are, not what they represent. So for me, getting rid of some t-shirts was like, hey, these things are cotton and ink. They don't represent my identity, my achievements. Yeah, I may have a t-shirt in my closet from a high school track meet that felt like I had an achievement, but it doesn't represent all that I'm worth, my value. And once you kind of disconnect that identity or that emotional thing to the object, it makes it easier to part with the object and to hold on to your identity, dignity, whatever it might be. Okay, the second one is to kind of be mindful or observant of what the emotions are. And so if we can observe what those emotions are, we might be able to figure out the deeper things that are there. So for the longest time, I really struggled to get rid of that t-shirt I mentioned from high school, because I think as I got older and I wasn't competing anymore, I used to find some validation in that competition. And once that was gone, was there going to be a hole left in my identity, or was I going to come to terms with the fact that whether I compete or not, whether people see me as athletic or not, doesn't matter, because I can make a difference in somebody's life in a bunch of other ways, and that's maybe where I should be putting it at this phase of my life. And once you move over there, it makes it a little bit easier to let go of back there. And number 3 is to tag team it. This is something that you might not actually be able to see. You might have a blind spot with some of those things in your life that you can't let go of, right? So if you are married, my goodness, it was so much easier for me to get rid of my wife's collection of cottage living than it was for me to tag on my Runner's World from 1997 that I didn't really read and couldn't bear to get rid of. So maybe you need somebody to just be honest with you and just to keep you honest with this process and say, hey, this thing, and this is where it gets sticky. I'm not talking t-shirts or magazines or pictures anymore. I'm talking about the person who can come to you and say, you've been holding on to anger and unforgiveness with that person, that situation far too long. You are actually living by the expectations of others and not what you really value and find important. This is a person who's not afraid to twist it in just a little bit because they know it's ultimately for your good. So choose that person wisely, but definitely tag team onto somebody who's actually going to have your best interests at heart, but it's going to push you to do this. Now, I talk about the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown often because there's a little saying in there, and it's less but better. And as I think about that, it's the quest to kind of move people towards minimalism, maybe just a little bit. But the idea that if you have less, but it's better, then you have a better enjoyment of those things that truly matter to you. So a lot of this, what I'm getting at, is this ability to ascertain value in an unemotional way so that you can actually give your emotional self to the things that really are valuable. So do you know somebody else that has the pack rat, and if they asked you to be their tag team person, you jump right in because you have their best interest at heart? Well, send them this video. A little passive aggressive, but that's okay. It's for their own good. And I'm interested from your perspective. What is that thing that you know right now, before you even take time to think about it, is something that you got to purge out? I don't care if it's t-shirts or whatever it is. Drop that down in the comments. I look forward to seeing that and you guys back here next time. See ya.